morning and welcome everyone. This ULT meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic presented by a student or a discussion that is in the form of a round table. The movement of the 19th century is very much alive and kicking in the universe today. It has been disseminated all over the world, and if we look very deeply, we can see that it has made tremendous difference in our thinking, in the philosophy that is being disseminated. There are signs that some parts of it is incorporated, and in the scientific world also. Those minds that are inclined towards the spiritual will understand it better than others, it is stated. We're going to read the declaration. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is selected from the quotation books of HPB, Mr. Judge, and Mr. Crosby. HPB. An extra-cosmic God is fatal to philosophy. An intracosmic deity, that is, the spirit and matter, inseparable from each other, is a philosophical necessity. Secret Doctrine 2, page 41. Quotation from Mr. Judge. Lift your head and look around upon the hulks of past faults. They were means and teachers. Mr. Crosby. The esoteric savior is not man, but the divine principle in every human being. What is needed is a knowledge that leads to him or it. The foolish look for a man, the wise look for a message. Few know the messenger when he comes, but it is possible for many to know a true message by putting it to every conceivable test. The Messiah has come and gone, but he has left the Comforter, his message. It is possible for men to get at the truth of these things if they will take the trouble to make the search in all sincerity. And now today's talk. What is God?
Morning, friends. Oh boy. Well, it's funny. It's great to be joyous for this occasion. Life is joy. Such a broad subject with so little time to present this subject. So I came across a little saying when delivering a speech or a presentation, they say, be brief, be sincere, and be seated. Okay. So with that, keep in mind, I'll try to hold to that. In trying to prepare for today's presentation, I normally do my man on the street survey. I went with the thought of calling various organizations, Buddhist or Hindu, etc., Muslim, but pretty much those who are already invested in that framework, we know pretty much how they think or what God is. So I reversed it and approached several people on the street, young folks, just to find out just how they thought with such subject. And one person said, God is that which makes you stronger. Another, God is anything and everything. Elderly lady, God is love. Another person, God is unlimited possibilities of existence. And one Jehovah's Witness that I did speak to said, God is a spirit creature. And anything and everywhere was somebody else. So that's just once I thought to just go out and interview about 10, 12, 25 people just to get a consensus. But the reason why I dealt with the young folks, because as we know, the world is constantly changing. It's just think years ago or centuries ago, we all would be burned or hung or put to death to even discuss what is God. I'm thinking of the former Theosophers in centuries past who were Giordano Bruno and Hypatia, those who actually questioned what is God. So in that sense, you can see clearly that times have changed. So there was a time in the scientific community, Newton, the guy who brought us gravity, thought that the universe was a big clock, and it ran down. It had to be wound up again, the perpetual energy. But today, scientists are, it's looked at, the universe is looked at as being mathematical, very abstract. We have electronics with cell phones and fax machines, and it's just magic, Electronics is like PFM. Some electrical engineers say once. Now, what is PFM? Pure blank magic, say the F later. Okay. And then I went to the bookstores just to see what was on the shelves, The scientific section, they got books out called The God Particle, by this Nobel laureate. The Mind of God, Is God a Mathematician? God in the Multiverse, A Failed Hypothesis. Then I went to the religious section also, and then saw articles out of magazines, religious magazines. Did God really command genocide? What else? Is God a moral monster? So you can see how this notion of God really is expandable or malleable in some sense. Now, I even thought one time to call an atheist because there's all this pantheist, deist, all that's mixed up in the same bag. And then there's this TV series, Ancient Aliens, some of us may have seen on TV, where they speak of the gods, meaning that the mysteries that confront us today around the world, the pyramids, Easter Island, all kinds of mysterious things that go on, that they are attributing the new thought comes about by saying that these are ancient aliens or astronauts who've come to Earth and constructed these archaeoastronomical things, and there's no mystery in their thinking why the pyramids, the three pyramids, are aligned with the belt of Orion, but it still comes under the umbrella of mystery. They haven't yet discovered Atlantis or Lemuria to see that we human beings here existed far, far back in the region of time and played a part in that construction. Although our state was much higher than what we are now, just fallen angels, some refer to us as. Now, there are various views about God in the various religions. Primarily the Western religions, you know, we have Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, in which God is referred to as a singular and also as a he. Now, because mostly I'm brought up, reared in the Christian faith, I'm mostly familiar with that. And most of us are Westerners, and we have ideas about that. But looking at the, I want to follow my outline for a second here. Looking at the notion of God that's presented in the Old Testament, meaning that according to Theosophy, HPB in some of her references said that God has become a gigantic man, a jealous man, a moral ruler, so to speak, a master of the universe in that sense. But what I want to do to expand beyond that notion, because when we say God in the universe, I want to set the stage by just what I did. I went to the library and I got this book here on the Hubble spacecraft that went out in space. And just to expand, I know Theosophy pertains primarily to our solar system, our Milky, and within our solar system, our Milky Way galaxy. So all what pertains to Theosophy is pertaining to just the system. But when you say God and the universe, some kind of way you get this notion of the universe, how vast it is. So just to expand our notion to a universal level, very quickly, I just wanted to show how vast we're talking about. We're talking about God and galaxies. Well, let me show for a second here. There's one right here, for instance. Well, this is not the Milky Way, but this galaxy right here. It states right here about this galaxy. It says that, let's see, it's twice the diameter of the Milky Way and contains 1 trillion stars. It could have 10 trillion planets or more. 10 trillion planets or more. And so the God that we're talking about is controlling just one planet and in one aspect of a solar system, not even a galaxy. And to show how many galaxies there are, this again, now all these little are galaxies in the vast infinitude of space. And in one galaxy, you're talking trillions and billions of stars and planets. So that's just to expand our consciousness to get beyond this notion of the Earth. So this is here to look at.
Let's see the one you have in here.
This right here. Okay. Now, to begin, where does Theosophy come in if you move beyond the orthodoxy of organized religion? We have the masses of people, and then you have the mystics. The masses of people are those who just accept literally what's presented in their scriptures, pretty much. And through a study of comparative religion, you find that there's a symbolic language that was used to write these scriptures of these various religions. And those who are mystically inclined, some kind of way, have gone beyond the veil. You have, for the Jewish scriptures, the Kabbalah. And they come up with a different interpretation. The priests, when they did write these scriptures, they revealed, but yet they concealed. And it's the inner knowledge that Theosophy points to, whereby you have to work for yourself to go beyond the veil to find this system, this codified knowledge, which points to the individual. And the individual as being that, having that internal God within. But to go further into this, to start with God from a theosophical point of view, I found in the littlest book, well, broken down for kids. This is because for the children who ask why. And one of the very first chapter is God, okay? And this is the aunt explaining God to a child. So keep in mind what Lincoln said, that he would first break an idea down to a level where a child would understand it before presented to someone. And in this particular chapter about God, the kid is asking, well, who made God? The whole in synopsis, the kids are playing, and then one kid says to another, well, we cannot play on a Sunday because God doesn't like that. We might be punished. And the child gestured, well, who is God? Who made God? So they got to go ask the little aunt, and the auntie begins to tell them that it's no outside God. I'm just going to pop through this real quick. And it says, this is a universal life. And one word that you can use for universal life or consciousness is God. Let's see. Hold on for a second. Let me see. She's telling them that each one is really a thinker, a perceiver, looking at all things, yet himself the same perceiver. That is the only God we can ever know, who can ever punish us. It's not God. It's not an outside God. We ourselves, our perceivers, are really God. That's what she's telling them. And it says, in this, but let us take it this way. We all live in a universe of life, and there is indeed no better word for God than life. In this universe of life are many grades, just as in school, and calling the mineral kingdom the first grade, and there are forms of life not yet able to enter that grade, calling human beings the last grade, but there are beings above human as well as below human. So this whole universe is God itself, simply put, for a child. But going, pardon me, and I want to set the stage by reading quotation a little bit from the Mahatma Letters. You know, we speak of HPB, but then these are individuals who sent her and their take on religion per se. And this is one of them stating that I will point out the chief cause of nearly 2/3 of the evils that pursue humanity ever since that cause has become a power. It is religion, under whatever form and in whatsoever nation. It is the sacerdotal caste, the priesthood, and the churches. It is in those illusions that man looks upon as sacred, and that he has to search out the source of that multitude of evils, which is the great curse of humanity, and that almost overwhelms mankind. Ignorance created gods, and cunning took advantage of the opportunity. It is belief in God and gods that makes 2/3 of humanity the slaves of a handful of those who deceive them under the false pretense of saving them. It is not man ever ready to commit any kind of evil if told that his God or gods demand the crime. Voluntary victims of an illusory God, the abject slave of his crafty ministers. So what further it gets to the idea that God has become a crutch. In other words, it's a theological crutch. But now you say, if there's no God, how did this universe come about? If one goes into the secret doctrine, the secret doctrine, first of all, talks about the first fundamental, stating that there is this omnipresent, absolute, boundless principle upon which all comes forth out of. We spoke of this absolute. We're all familiar with that. No, there's no need to go further into that. But it's the idea that there's just periodical emanation from which the worlds began. And from this, you have hierarchies. Hierarchies, they're called various names in various religions. And as HPB states in the secret doctrine, that all the beings in the universe are preparing to become men, have been men, and are men. So these terms that we use for archangels, etc., they're still men, but divine men, highly evolved beings. We refer to them as beings, spiritual beings, but one word that, keeping in mind that man means mind. So we're talking not the little man that we see walking around here every day in pursuit of economic well-being, but developed minds, manas. They say that man only uses 10% of his mind. Can you envision a man using 100% of his mind? So those are the beings that we were speaking of. Not only manas, but connected to buddhi and atma. So that is the man that we're referring to, the universal man. So, well, anyway, these hierarchies unfold, and you have to have some kind of understanding of a theosophical framework to come up with, see how this God idea evolved. And HBB states in the secret doctrine how, this is secret doctrine here, how it was a third race. We speaking Theosophy, we are familiar with that. It says, it was the religion of the third and fourth races. In the common acceptance of the term, neither the Lemurians nor yet the Lemurian Atlanteans, they knew of no dogma, and they had no faith per se. It speaks of how the initial feeling that awoke in these beings were one of unity with that from where they were issued from. And that was this feeling of worship that we still carry about. But it wasn't external worship. It's over time as spirit descends into matter that states like the sons of light and the battle between life immortal and life mortal. And those who are lost in that fight, they became eventually the sons of darkness, meaning that they started worshiping matter. You know, as spirit descends into matter, then matter takes on its own form and its own power. And then from this external worship, then becomes all of what follows from that external worship. And at one point it becomes phallic. And then further on, she states that, not to name a particular religion, but that is the basis of one particular religion somewhat. She says that there was a time when, at the dawn of his conscience, the man of the third root race had thus no beliefs that could be called religion. That is to say, he was equally as ignorant of, quote, gay religions, full of pomp and gold, as any system of outward worship. There was a time when there was one lip and one religion. That was the golden age that she speaks of. Sometimes we talk about. It was the golden age in those days of old, the age when the gods walked the earth and walked freely among men. Okay, so it's the notion that we have descended into matter, and on that descent we have eclipsed our spiritual visions, and as thus it's been reverted. Now, how do we get back to that godlike state, coming down to an individual level? Well, science is, as well as science has, let me see, where's my quotes about science? Einstein, for instance, he states that the greatest curse of the Western world is belief in a personal God. And that's Mr. Einstein. You have I was watching 7 Years in Tibet just the other day, and the communists was taking over Tibet. The communist general from China was talking to one of the lamas, and the lama was saying to the general, this is our sacred space, etc. like that. And the general turns around to the lama, says, religion is poison. And I'm reminded, him being a communist, I'm reminded what Marx said sometime before that, that religion is the opiate of the people. So you can see that's following that communist line down. But at the same token, though, religion is twofold. It has cursed, but yet it has blessed those who are at that point where the words of the prophets are needed and heeded. But it's after the prophets and the teachers go, it's that class that comes about and through their cunning create all these orthodoxies and lock folks into a box. And that's referencing that quotation that was stated by the master there, how we were killed. You see it in the world today, in the Middle East and various other places, because of religion and because of each individual serving their particular God, not knowing what that God is, and for the most part, it's some God external to themselves. But now, we can later on in questions get into sevenfold nature, man, evolution of consciousness, the universe, builders, and things like that. But specifically on an individual level, how does one get back to recognizing that God within? The first step is living the life of a soul. Thinking that you have to come to the point that we're not a body. We're not the mind completely, because we can change and control the mind. So what's that? That's superior to that, the soul within. And when the body dies, they say that the soul lives on. So where was the soul before it came into the body? And now they're talking about out-of-body experience and stuff like that. So it has to be the recognition that you are the soul, and that you've made yourself. God didn't make you, like let's say God made the world like as if out of nothing. Through our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, we have produced what we are today. And it's the karma, that universal law within all this matrix that helps us to undo what we have done in given time, throughout cyclic time, that is. Everything's on cycles. And the idea of perception, for instance, there's this radical unity of nature. If you think that you cannot think of yourself as existent outside of nature. So you exist, then nature exists, and then there's this relationship between you and nature. And this idea of consciousness and this idea of perception. As your perception increases, so does your consciousness. Or it's that relationship between perception and consciousness that allows you to reach that level of perfection. You can start with, there's an example given about how a fellow goes out and looks up at the sky with his naked eye. He doesn't see but a few stars. But then he goes out later with a telescope and he looks up and he sees many stars. So the sky didn't change. His faculty of perception changed. So what happens with us as our perception increases, throughout this domain of the field that we're working within, does our perfection increase? We work with that later. But the idea is that how Mr. Wadia puts it, let me just go to Mr. Wadia. He says it much better than I. Okay, first of all, he says that we are perceivers, and perceivers, here. If one grabs this idea that we're all perceivers of consciousness, okay? And evolution pertains to these faculties. So as our faculties increase, so does our perception increase or unfold, okay? There is one universal self-consciousness. He brings that about, okay? And then it is the unfoldment and the growth of our perception that leads us to expand our perception to a point where we become one with the universe and all that is within it. And it's that realization, it's just like how you can speak about having a toothache, but until you realize that, you really experience that. So it's this experience of, there's always beyond, just like the physical eye, there's a beyond, is what's invisible. There's always what's thinkable on a mental level, and there's always what's unknowable, beyond the soul level. So you're always expanding and growing. So when you reach a point of, let's say, a limit within a certain system, then you are perfected to that system. You know what's all about that system. But knowing it is different than being it, living it, experiencing it as one unit, just like they say here. Nature is living. And it's the idea of not being able to just talk about nature, but to become part of nature. I'm going to stop right here because I see our time is up. Remember I said, be brief, be sincere, and be seated. So I'm going to attempt to do that and open it up for questions aloud, because it's such a vast subject, and we're not in 25 minutes going to get to the root of all this when it encompasses so much. Worlds, races, states of consciousness, evolution, logos, monads, and all that. So crunching all that in 25 minutes and coming to a theosophical lecture, you don't get it all as well. In theosophical books, it's living the life, that is being about theosophy. That's how one perceives it. So with that being said, I open it up to questions, thoughts.
Well, you said quite a bit, even though you claim you haven't said it all. To try to get to the essence of what you're talking about, there's a difference between God and religion. In the golden age, you said there was no religion, or there was one religion. In a golden age, a golden age of beings, you spoke of golden age of beings on earth, and a certain type of universal man as being something that existed and should, I take it, you mean, be aspired to now, to the practice of being, or a being like this universal man, or within these universal principles. Now, God, as a creator, I think you also made reference to that, it seems to be another matter. God as a creator seems to be in line with theosophical perspective. The foundation of a universe, or the foundation of universes, or consists of the groundwork or the inner works of the universe, which can be symbolized by light. That the life that you mentioned as being a theosophical principle of God, that God is life. I think you said something like that, right? Then that life principle being God, symbolized as, in the scriptures, as light, is the creator aspect of God. Now, as opposed to the God that society or man has become acquainted with, and by those beings that you described as people who are taking advantage of people, the priesthood, the class of individuals who take advantage of the masses, opposed to others. Mystics, I think you referred to that. Now, so, would it be safe to say then that what God is is that we could at least say that God is eternal principle of good.
Oh, good. Um, well, yes, you can go with that, but now I came across something with you have God, G-O-D, that would be the absolute essence. And when that absolute essence manifests, then you have gods, the various hierarchies. But now that absolute essence is beyond good and bad. Doesn't have any qualities. It's the absolute. It's beyond the range and reach of human thought. So if we want to go back to that from which everything comes out of, the source itself, the unknowable, not the unknown of Hegel and Kant, European philosophy, but the unknowable. And but then coming down to the gods, there are many gods, like in the Hindu pantheon. Oh, there are cores of gods. And so HBB always talks about, she's asked a question in her dialogues here about, about worshiping this god or that god and making some jealous and all that sort of thing. So that's why.
So would you say these spiritual beings, these spiritual hierarchies are gods? Is that what you're saying?
They are men, first of all, but they're not to be prayed to, but they're to be honored and respected, because they too will end under this great cycle, under this great Mahatma mantra in which all beings come forth. But then they too will end, just like Nirvana will end. And they're all illusionary in that sense, that out from that one absolute reality, everything is illusionary. So you too have the power to become. But these higher beings in these various hierarchies, archangels, angels, all these beings, they have given of themselves, what we are is them, okay? And they could be honored and whatever, but to worship them in the sense, not as gods necessarily, but to be aware of them as gods is a different story, because as Jesus said, you will do bigger and greater things than I. Now, if you take that literally, here's the Son of God, and some, according to how they interpret it, is God or was God in the flesh. So if God is telling man that you will do bigger and better things than I, he's telling that you have the capability of becoming as he is, as God. So, there's no need to worship another God if you yourself is that. Oh. And then in Genesis, he's telling you after they're kicked out the garden, he says, behold, but before he's kicked out the garden, behold, man has become as us to know good and evil. So man has become God-like. So there's telling you there that there's something about man that is God-like, okay? But over the years, we've been inculcated and paralyzed and poisoned with this notion that we're original sinners, all of that stuff. And that we have to regurgitate out to come back forth with some kind of understanding what our true nature is. Yes, Sandra.
I would miss this talk for nothing, because I want to share a very insightful Christmas for us, and maybe ask for your perspective. In the middle of the Christmas dinner, one of the people suddenly said that they're having a religious identity crisis. And anything about Christmas is threatening, so that nobody should wish Merry Christmas to her or give presents or mention it, that it is threatening. I had a mistake to actually buy a Christmas tree for her. So the entire Christmas we all were dancing around trying to see how not to upset the person, because she was very sincere. She said, I'm searching for God, I'm in the midst of religious identity crisis, Christmas is threatening. And none of the people were Christian. We just all like Christmas. So it became very taxing Christmas on everyone, because we all were trying to understand what's going on with the person, how can we help, how we cannot upset, and what is she seeking. And at one moment I've actually mentioned to another person, I said, listen, if she would just find herself, she would leave the God alone. And then I thought of my statement, and I said, maybe it was harsh, but it was so true. Because what I felt that the person was seeking was, what you mentioned, that God image that can be an image as a personified God as a Christ or Buddha or anyone else, or a set of morals, structures, cultural understandings, holidays that we choose to fit in, instead of applying the God within us and actually breaking through all of these sets and going out with our own divine creativity and new way of being in the universe. That is the God that is inside, instead of trying to fit ourselves into one of the 5, 6 religions and gods. So it was very insightful, in a way, Christmas, to see the struggle of another being and a very sincere search, but the search outside rather the search within.
It's came across the idea about take a war and you have opposing armies praying to the regular notion of this God, and HBB referred to it as sending up waves and waves of black magic. He was sending up to this God. You wanted petitions to become victorious, to slay your enemies. You wanted God to choose, and it's become a big joke. Just like in one of the tapes, one of the comedians was saying that God loves you, but if you don't accept his word, he's going to send you to hell forever. But yet he loves you, and he's always needing money, stuff like that. It's we've been had. We have been had, and it's this total reversal that we have to go through again. And we've been manipulated, and the masses of people, that is so evident. And just today, you see how few are here versus wherever they are in synagogues, ashrams, temples, or such. But not to say that there again, those who are there aren't sincere, seeking. But you have to have that fire from within. You have to be ignited, because so much has been just coming from the outside, and people have, well, like Malcolm said, we're busy working from can't see in the morning and can't see at night. And so when we do go someplace, we want to be relieved of our misery and our comfort, temporarily. Exactly. The comfortable. And we want our dose of well-being, but that's just temporary, because the next day is the grind again for 6 days and then back. Hunjai first.
Well, that comfort is actually also internal, because the East meditates. They go quiet, they go internal, and they imbibe their own soul. And that light, which is in each heart, is there. But if we don't try to contact it, it's not of this world, it's not of the physical world, so it cannot make itself known. It has to be that we have to realize it, and that requires soul awakening. This is not an external process, it's an internal process. It's the soul awakening internally to its own possibilities. For those human beings who are at religion at this time, is that their soul is not awake to its own possibilities. So you cannot really strip human beings from their ideology or what they believe in, because then they would have empty space, whereas before they had some kind of ideology. That is why it is not a conversion, it's an awakening.
Yes, right. Theosophy is a system of knowledge. Theosophy, if called a religion, it's the wisdom religion. It's just like in this holiday spirit, we talk about the 3 wise men that came from the East. What is it that these guys knew that made them wise? It was this wisdom doctrine, and were there more than 3? So it's over time that this wisdom, self-knowing, self-knowledge becomes belief. After the rise of certain orthodoxies, you got to believe instead of knowing. See, that's the difference right there. And Theosophy speaks of the relationship of man, nature, and God, and that knowledge is called Theosophy. And the custodians of that are the masters, and they present this knowledge in the world. It's always been in the world, but they present it cyclically when it's apropos for the time where people's minds or the ground is fertile in the soil and they're receptive. And they do this through astrological cycles, astronomical cycles, in union with the proper times. It's just like the farmer. He knew when to plant the crops. So they knew when to send the messenger out, and people's minds was ready. And it states that HBB and Jesus, all these people, they come when the time is ripe. Some of them, in their enthusiasm, come a little before time. But had they not come, just like in the had HBB not come when she came, Manas was ripe, and she came to awaken the minds, they say, in Isis Unveiled, to break the molds of men's minds, to present these truths, to ask us to question. And that's all Theosophy does, is you have to become an inquirer to begin with, not someone that's sitting by passively being spoon-fed, but asking why, starting with that.
I know it's said that some seem to come before their time, but how can any come before their time? At some time or other, that mind has to be jogged.
Mm-hmm.
And by coming, they at least got some people to ask questions
Yeah.
and go in that direction.
I've read and heard also that Jesus came a little bit before his time. And as in all things, just like you shifting a card, if you're out of the timing is off, then something's happening. And then if you don't come at the proper time, possibly you could damage the car or something like that. Or if you don't come at the proper time, there's going to be this misunderstanding. And I don't know all yet, about what happened there with him coming a little bit before time. People were right, they state in the history, they were right for occultism, especially centuries after that. And the church was so powerful, the Roman church was so, well, it had not yet arisen, but I guess the mindset of the people, have to be in accordance with the time cycle. Yeah.
Okay. I think Jesus, if he came at the right time. He's supposed to come because his time was anointed, as they say. The people are never ready, because the question becomes, where do we live? Where do people live? Where are they living? Are they seeing themselves as what you've described as a universal man, or are they seeing themselves as human beings? Do they really have soul consciousness in their daily activities and their daily practices, or do they have human interactions and based on human principles and get deceived by what they call Maya, illusion? Because these type of realities explains. I mean, illusion explains why people might not see what's before them, because what you're suggesting is that man himself is God. And for most people to take that, accept that principle, that they themselves are God, and come into the realization that all they have to do is realize that they're a master almighty authority. It's hard to, maybe if they lived that way, they would have that consciousness, that perception, that awakening. Mm. But for ordinary man, like you say, the masses, and what religion has done to the ordinary man, that's very high level, yeah, kind of, you have to have. And so to me, the discussion needs to go to, well, what does soul consciousness look like? What opposed to what man normally does? What does soul consciousness look like?
Okay, to respond to that, soul consciousness looks at what the spiritual man that Arjuna talks, or Krishna talks about in the Gita, one who is not swayed by likes and dislikes. The devotional books that HPB, that we have here, that's what soul consciousness talks about. The Dhammapada, for instance, loving thy neighbor. All the golden verses that all the prophets have come forth and leading that type of life. That's the life that leads to that soul consciousness. And once you accept that, things begin to happen. It's just like when you start meditating, you you find things happening within your own psyche. And so when you start trying to, not trying to, but living a soul life as a soul instead of a body, having a soul, certain things occur to you. So that's what happens. So, but I'll get back to you too, John. I want to, right here, put this equation on the board. And that'll be it. What happened to my glasses? I got them. Okay, here they are. This is very interesting for those of you who are scientifically inclined. This comes from one of our, it states here that E, that's the E, this is I, and then you got pi equals -1. Now, this equation, renowned mathematician Michael Crandall once remarked, is enough to make even the strongest atheists think seriously about belief in God. Now, that equation right there. Now,
How does it define God?
okay, well, yeah, that's true too. Okay, but now it says, known as Euler's or Euler, E-U-L-E-R, identity with the special case of x equals pi. Hey, that's pi, by the way. Okay? Through complex analysis, the relation links 5 fundamental mathematical constants. And those are 0, 1, then pi in itself, and it says with addition, multiplication, exponentation, logarithms, trigonometry, transcendental numbers, and complex numbers. So whatever the world, we said earlier about how the world has become mathematical, shows you how scientists, well, in this guy, he's talking about the God particle, and they come up with these equations. So I'm just relating to how it says, Theosophy teaches that the universe emanates from one primordial abstract source, okay? The metaphysical realm of ideation, the realm of the Dhyana koans, form an organizing principle far more and more defined and grosser levels of matter. And it goes on to talk about how these guys are running into dark matter and stuff like that. And dark matter could be, again, how they come up with these liar points, that they go no further. So they're seeming to converge. This is just something that I came across, thanks to Mr. Dancer here. He gave me this some time ago. But in terms of Theosophy as science, dealing with, and the mathematicians are approaching God in a sense, but come back to Tunja's, how does he look at, what does he consider God, though? But that caught my eye in terms of atheists, an equation that the strongest atheists may think seriously about God. But I think, Tunja, it's not going to be the God of the Bible or any God like that. It's just as normally given.
It's an omnipresent one he's talking about.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Yeah, it would be.
Well, HPV, when she first asked the question,
Mhm.
she also asked, what is God?
Mm-hmm.
It was very interesting to read it in her biography. And she said, then she started searching for an answer as to what God is. And then she says she came across the custodians of knowledge. And their advice was, look inside. When you have discovered who you are, then you have discovered God is.
Okay. Well, go ahead, son. No.
Something that Veer touched on before was that basically that we are gods is so empowering, but it's unpopular.
Mhm.
That why
Unpopular.
unpopular. And it's, I think, very self-explanatory why it's so unpopular, because to identify yourself as a god, you have to shift full responsibility on yourself, that I am God, I am divine, so I have to get off this chair and actually do things for my life.
Mm-hmm.
When it's so comfortable and convenient to remain children forever and ever.
Yes, yes.
And to think that there is some God who will take care of us and do things, and you just pray and do what he says as a parent,
Mhm.
and things will happen. But it is a fascinating historical, cultural, and religious phenomenon that external God failed humanity for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, these miracles did not deliver. You can sit and pray as long as you want. If you are not projecting your energies that direction, nothing happens. But we still tend to believe that as a humanity. And this is a fascinating phenomenon. How can we move forward? Like with children, at one point we say, you're going to college, and then you're on your own. And suddenly, whether the child wants or not, they go on. But with us, since we created that God can never abandon us because it's our creation. What do you think could shift us as a humanity from that external caretaking God to realizing the God within us? Do you believe we're shifting through sort of more scientific approach of basically identifying more God with the mathematical and scientific concepts, and sort of depersonalizing, because the math can't take care of you, just the principle? Or what do you think can be the sort of principle that will move us forward from that child mentality?
There's a lot there. I think it's a combination of both, because see, theosophy is this. It's theosophy because we consider science in terms of spiritual science. Okay, it's a philosophy of it's how do they say it? It's the philosophy of it's a synthesis of science and philosophy and art, and it's that fusion together, bringing together, knowing it's the science of life and the art of living. The science of life in that, health-wise, you start like with your health. You know that you got so many hours a day. You have to intake so much food. You got to do all those things according to some kind of these laws that have been impressed upon nature. And it's a living nature, and you're part of living nature. You are one with nature. And then the art of living that, and so it's all that coming together, how it was in the past. It was one doctrine, like one body of knowledge, and over the years it's become a branch, a specialty, and so it's bringing it back together where it's that fusion again, the art of life, the science of living, et cetera, without repeating ourselves.
But isn't physical science catching up with, isn't physical science confirming spiritual science?
To a degree.
To a degree, and say, yeah.
Do we have to have the whole thing? They weren't doing it before at all. Science and so-called spirituality or religion was like diametrically opposed.
That's true. Yeah.
So to a degree,
they're gradually coming there. It's just like you take Einstein, who says the personal concept of God is the greatest defect of Western thought, but yet in his equations he gets beyond just how we were looking. But at the same time, we cannot make science. Some people have made science their God. Right. So it's that philosophy that's needed to balance it out.
Science is evolving, if you will. And,
science of the soul, that's what it is.
It's evolving.
Yeah, it's evolving. Yeah, well, I see we've gone past our time. And anyway, as I said, be seated, be brief. Thanks for coming, folks.
we should have been here. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.